Hello and welcome. I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. President Trump has announced an additional 25% tariff on goods from India, citing the country's import of Russian oil. The executive order increases pressure on India as it faces escalating tariffs from the United States. Russian President Vladimir Putin held constructive talks with US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff in Moscow over the Ukraine conflict. The three-hour meeting came just before US President Donald Trump's deadline for Russia to halt its offensive or face new sanctions. Russian strikes have killed 2 people and wounded 10 others, including 4 children in Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia region, according to Governor Ivan Fedorov. Over the past 24 hours, Russian forces carried out 567 attacks across 16 settlements in the region. Israeli forces have killed a further 138 people in Gaza in the last 24 hours, bringing the death toll to over 61,000, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. At least 20 Palestinians were also killed, and many others injured when a truck carrying humanitarian aid overturned onto a crowd in central Gaza. A top UN official has warned of catastrophic consequences if Israel expands its military operations in the Gaza Strip. This comes amid reports that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pushing for a total reoccupation of the enclave. Italy's government has approved a €13.5 billion project to build the world's longest suspension bridge connecting Sicily to the mainland. The state-funded bridge over the Strait of Messina receives final approval after years of planning. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi will visit China for the first time in over 7 years to attend the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit on August the 31st. The visit comes as diplomatic ties with Beijing improve amid rising tensions with the United States. Carol Nawrocki, a nationalist, historian and supporter of US President Donald Trump, was sworn in as Poland's new president after winning the June the 1st election. His victory deals a significant blow to the pro-EU government. Now we have some breaking news coming from the United States. President Donald J. Trump has signed an executive order imposing an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods in response to the country's continued purchase of Russian oil and weapons. This comes as a statement from the White House. These came after a string of threats from the Trump administration. Earlier, India had said that it was committed to concluding a fair, balanced and mutually beneficial bilateral trade agreement. Last year, the US had a trade deficit of $45.8 billion with India. We're now joined by 2 guests to discuss this breaking story now. We're joined by Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, who's a former diplomat, and we're also joined by Peter Cordello. He's a chief market economist at Sparta Capital Securities. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us on this discussion. Ambassador Dayal, I wanted to start with you. India has called this new tariff unjustified, yet Washington states Russian oil purchase as the main reason for this additional 25% tariff. What were your thoughts when this was announced, and how will this impact the Indian economy?
Well, I think it will impact the Indian economy quite adversely. As it is, the 25% tariffs which had been announced earlier were leading to a lot of anxiety. Indian stocks were in danger of falling. Jobs were in danger of getting lost because many firms which rely on exports were going to retrench workers. Now, this additional penalty which is being imposed by President Trump will certainly impact India adversely. And I think the need of the hour is for the 2 countries to undertake very serious diplomacy. It should be diplomacy which is a win-win in nature. In other words, both sides gain from the net outcome. The United States wants a trade deal, and I think we are in the process of negotiating one. There are some hurdles which have come up. I think it's very important to seriously make efforts to overcome these hurdles. And if there are some concessions which are possible and which don't impact either side very seriously, then we should make those concessions. Both sides should be very, very proactive in finding the solution, because the partnership is very important in nature. India and United States have a strategic partnership. It's all embracing, it covers many areas, and it's important to salvage that partnership. So, in my view, the impact of the additional penalty which comes after the tariffs will be serious, and both sides should put their heads down to finding a solution, because nobody wants the Indian economy to be impacted, nobody wants the bilateral ties to be impacted, and the only way out is to find the right solution.
Yes, thank you very much, Ambassador. I wanted to bring Peter in next. A $45.8 billion trade deficit is what India has with the United States. What would be a balanced, fair and mutually beneficial agreement here, considering India already faces a 25% tariff and now another additional 25% tariff? How is this going to affect the Indian economy, confidence in the stock market, etc.? Peter, what's your analysis of this?
Well, the initial reaction is obviously going to be negative, and market sentiment is going to be negative for the Indian stock market. But as your previous guest said, they need a solution, and they will come to the solution. And I think to correct that huge trade deficit is that India needs to begin to purchase oil from the United States, and I think that's the basis for Trump slapping on another 25 basis point, which brings it up to 50%. That would be, just detrimental to the Indian economy, and that would create massive amount of lost jobs and everything of that sort. So I think this, action taken by President Trump suggests that the Indian government is going to have to, either through diplomacy or through direct negotiations between Trump and Modi, to come to a solution. And I think that's what will happen. Of course, the news is shocking, and like I said, going to be negative for the stock market and confidence. But I think all of that will return once there is a deal put in place that would be satisfactory both to the United States and to India. And I think the key here is to begin to purchase American oil.
Yes, Ambassador Dayal, as Peter said, the United States and Donald Trump in particular, of course, very much want India to stop buying Russian oil. Do you see that happening given the escalating pressure that the US is putting it under?
Well, the pressure is tactical, because President Trump has a transactional approach and he's pressurizing India. And India has to be realistic, because our overall interests involve a good relationship with the United States. And I think it's important that our Prime Minister and President Trump, who have a very good relationship, and they have both called each other very good friends of each other, they must undertake a dialogue and find a solution, because it's not difficult to reach a solution when you have the will. I think if, as the previous panelist pointed out, the United States wants India to purchase more oil, then certainly India should take a serious look at that, because India's energy requirements are massive. And we do import a lot of oil. We import from a whole host of countries. And there would be absolutely no harm in buying more oil from the United States because it would be in line with our own domestic requirements also. The important thing is that the need of the hour is a positive approach, an approach that takes into account the need to find solutions and to avoid any escalation of the conflict.
Peter Cordello, I just wanted to come back to you on the final question on this topic. Tariffs now will hit Indian gems, pharmaceuticals, textiles and electronics, sectors that fed 2% of India's GDP demand last year. How long before US retailers pass that cost on to American consumers and blunt the FED's disinflation story?
It won't take long for those costs to be passed on. It's just a matter of time. So you might not see it quickly happening, but within the foreseeable future, which might be a month or two away, those costs will be passed on, and the consumer will bear that blunt of the tariffs.
Gentlemen, you are staying with us as we discuss further stories from the economic world. We now move on where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to visit China for the first time in more than 7 years. A government source revealed today, signalling a possible easing of tensions with Beijing amid growing strain with the United States. Modi's visit will coincide with a summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, scheduled to begin on August the 31st. Modi's trip comes at a time when India's relationship with the US is facing its most significant crisis in years. This follows President Trump imposing the highest tariffs on Indian goods among Asian countries and then imposing an extra 25% just today. The Prime Minister's visit to the Chinese city of Tianjin for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit will be his first since the June of 2018. Sino-Indian relations have since soured, particularly after a military clash along the disputed Himalayan border in 2020. We're now once again joined by Ambassador Dayal to discuss this further. Ambassador Dayal, how significant is the fact that Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be now going to China? And is the United States the main reason for a sort of repair in relations? How do you think Modi in China is going to look and possibly bring relations forward?
No, I don't think that Prime Minister Modi's visit to China would in any way be a cause of concern to the United States. At least it should not be. India follows a policy of multi-alignment and strategic autonomy. India has a very complex relationship with China, and tensions at the border don't seem to be coming down. In fact, there have been, several efforts made to find a long-term solution, but these have failed because the Chinese covet Indian territory, and they are not prepared to accept the reality of the situation, that what they want from India is Indian territory. Now, Prime Minister's visit is for the summit meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's a multilateral meeting, and important players in this organization, apart from India and China, are Russia and several countries of Central Asia, Pakistan, Iran. So it is a complex grouping of countries which are in India's neighborhood. And it's important that India maintains a dialogue with them in the multilateral setting. The idea being cooperation, how to further cooperation. However, of course, there could be a bilateral meeting between the leaders of India and China. And if that happens, certainly the border issues could be discussed. So the attempt is to de-escalate tensions with China. It is not because of any sort of factor which is influencing the relationship with the United States. So the visit would not be directed or at all hostile in any sense to the United States. The visit would be more regional in nature to further regional cooperation and if possible, to find some solutions to the border issues with China.
Peter Cordello, I wanted to bring you back into this. Obviously, India and China have both faced huge tariffs from the United States under the Trump administration. Is there risk that due to these tariffs on India, and of course if the US and China talks fall through in Stockholm by that later on deadline this month, is it possible that these Trump tariffs will isolate the US economy in that regard, especially away from Asia?
Well, the possibility exists, but do I think it's going to happen? No. Asia needs the United States, and to a certain degree, the United States needs Asia as well. Now, tariffs, generally speaking, if they linger for a long period of time, creates protectionism. And we know that protectionism is not the right way to go. No man is an island, not even the United States. So I think, as I said previously, through diplomacy or through direct negotiations, that they will find a solution. And just like, the United States between is negotiating with China, and according to President Trump, they're pretty much close to a deal. And so I think, the process is taking a hard line approach, which eventually softens, and that's how deals are made.
Yes, thank you very much. We will continue to keep you posted and updated on that developing situation as we move on. The Swiss government has confirmed that there are no scheduled meetings with US President Donald Trump at the moment, although that could change in the future. The Swiss government has, however, been in discussions with US business leaders about the tariffs imposed on Swiss goods, like watches, machinery, and chocolate. Swiss President Karine Keller-Sutter is set to meet US Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Washington in a final effort to negotiate a reprieve from the 39% tariffs, which are set to take effect tomorrow. These tariffs could severely impact Switzerland's export-driven economy. As the situation unfolds, the Swiss industry is urging swift action to resolve the issue before it escalates. Okay, we are currently discussing the ongoing tariff impositions onto all countries, which are set to come in tomorrow. 39% on Switzerland. Unprecedented amount, with and other countries now facing high tariffs, including Brazil, whose 50% tariff has just come in. We're also covering the fact that India has now had an additional 25% imposed on it. This is due to the purchase of Russian oil. Okay, we now move on. In a significant development, China has backed Brazil in standing up to what it calls tariff bullying by the United States. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi voiced support in a call with top Brazilian advisor Celso Amorim. He said China opposes unreasonable interference and backs Brazil's rights to defend its economy. This comes as President Trump's 50% tariffs on Brazilian goods take effect. Brazil's Finance Minister Ferdinando Haddad will speak with US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent next week. He says Brazil seeks to normalise ties but is also preparing support for affected firms. Despite the tariffs, economists say Brazil's economy remains resilient. Now let's move over to the Middle East, where Hezbollah condemned the Lebanese government on Wednesday, accusing it of committing a grave sin by assigning the army the responsibility of enforcing a state monopoly on weapons. This statement intensifies the national debate over the calls for the Shiite group to disarm. On Tuesday, the cabinet authorized the Lebanese army to develop a plan aimed at restricting arms across the country to 6 official security forces by the end of the year, a significant challenge for the Iran-backed Hezbollah. The plan is to be presented to the cabinet by the end of August for discussion and approval. The decision followed growing pressure from the United States and anti-Hezbollah groups in Lebanon, urging the cabinet to publicly pledge to disarm the party, amid concerns that Israel might escalate its strikes on Lebanon if this is not addressed. In a written statement today, Hezbollah described the move as a direct result of its produced instructions from the US envoy, Tom Barak, referring to a proposal he presented to Lebanese authorities that outlined a timeline for the group's disarmament. We're now joined by Jordan Cope, who is a Middle East expert. He joins us live from Dallas. Thank you very much, Jordan, for joining us here on the program. Jordan, what are the chances that the Lebanese government can get the Iran-backed proxy group of Hezbollah to completely disarm?
Hezbollah so far has expressed resistance towards the Lebanese government's demand that Hezbollah disarm and that the ability to maintain arms remains reserved to the right of the state. Hezbollah ultimately has made very clear that it's supposedly, as it says in its own words, a betrayal to the Lebanese people and effectively a victory given to Israel. Now, Hezbollah has caused many of Lebanon's problems in recent years and decades, and it's not necessarily so much of an indigenous movement as people claim. In recent years, it's received approximately $700 million from its Iranian benefactors, and Hezbollah has sought to advance the Iranian Shiite Islamist vision that Iran has tried to export throughout the Middle East, as well as its terrorism. Iran has tried to create a nexus throughout the Middle East with other countries, such as in Lebanon, so that it can effectively and eventually attack Israel. And over the years, with Iran's help, Hezbollah has managed, at least in recent years, to amass a weapon stockpile that once reached as high as 150,000 rockets that were pointed towards Israel. Hezbollah remains one of the biggest concerns in the Middle East, not just to Israel, but also to the Lebanese people and the United States. In the 1980s, it conducted the deadliest terrorist attack against U.S. citizens in the history of the United States, at least when talking about terrorist attacks outside of the United States. Over 200 members of the U.S. Marines were killed in that barracks attack. And on top of that, one must not forget the Lebanese port blast in 2020, which many have suspected Hezbollah of being responsible for, having amassed weapons supposedly in the port and then interfering with judicial efforts afterwards. On top of that, the Hezbollah once engaged in a quasi-civil war and ultimately seized powers at one point to be able to exercise a veto on legislation. So while Hezbollah once controlled power effectively in Lebanon, it has seen its power dwindling more and more since Israel's recent intervention in Lebanon, which has significantly undermined its capabilities. And the Lebanese government, while it will have its challenges, must seize the opportunity now to once and for all disarm it.
Jordan, how would you analyse the stability of Lebanon now politically, given the fact that the possibility and the likelihood that Hezbollah does refuse? Does disarmament risk sparking civil violence or even a full-blown conflict in Lebanon?
It's certainly hard to predict. The fall of Syria from Bashar al-Assad to Ahmad al-Shara was definitely a development that would have also weakened Hezbollah's capabilities. It effectively cut off a major supply line connecting Iran to Lebanon, therefore making it more difficult for Hezbollah to rearm and get the resources that it needs to be the terrorist organization that it was once capable of being. And it's to no surprise that during the 12-day war, when Israel and Iran were at war, Hezbollah really did not intervene, simply because it probably had to worry about its own resources and maintaining them for its existential needs later on. And so it's a bit difficult to predict how what will happen in Lebanon in the coming days and weeks, but it certainly seems that Hezbollah has been dealt a heavy blow, and Hezbollah really hasn't exacted any revenge since Israel took out Hassan Nasrallah and Hashem Safiuddin, two of Hezbollah's foremost leaders. It certainly seems that Hezbollah is weakened, and it hasn't really responded as well to efforts by the Lebanese government, which has sent drones in recent days and hours to target Hezbollah officials in the country. And Hezbollah itself hasn't really sent rockets into Israel, at least in recent days either. So these are important calculations to consider when making that consideration.
Jordan, finally, Iran, as you've said, of course, bankrolls Hezbollah. Does the Raisi administration view disarmament as a red line issue worth escalating over here with Israel or even with US forces in Syria?
Can you please repeat it? Went a bit fuzzy. Which regime again?
The Raisi administration.
The Raisi, okay. So Iran itself is a bit handcuffed, and it knows right now that it has a pending nuclear deal that it will either have to sign by the end of the month. And if it refuses to sign that at the end of the month, it can perhaps expect future US strikes in the future targeting Iranian infrastructure, especially that belonging to its nuclear program. So Iran is going to probably be slightly handcuffed in this situation. And Iran didn't respond as strongly as many would have expected during the war between Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah's resources and capabilities were seriously undermined. And one must not forget that this was probably Iran's strongest proxy in the entire Middle East. Iran has many proxies throughout the Middle East, but Hezbollah was really the one that many most feared in Israel of being able to actually conduct an attack and inflict serious damage. Many of the 150,000 rockets that Hezbollah once had, at least a few years ago, some of them at least were precision guided and could have struck places deep in the heartland of Israel. And so I don't expect Iran anytime soon to intervene on Hezbollah's behalf as it has it in the past.
Thank you, Jordan Cope, for joining us here on the programme. Well, that's all that we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you for joining us.